All right,
Okay.
we're all back. Okay, so let me do that again. Let me share and okay. So let me readjust some things. Okay, so y'all gonna see me kind of looking somewhere else, but I'm going to show you the we're not going to necessarily run things here because it takes a little while to set up and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to show you what the tool looks like and does, and then I'm going to show you some results of simulations that I've done for a webinar, and so you can see sort of the domain and what the results kind of look like. So this right here, so scmBLOX, supply chain management blocks, the blocks part of it, BLOX, we have a proprietary environment that we created called scmBLOX,
Am I the only one that hears
S-I-M.
Chris very low? Sorry.
What?
I hear you a little bit low.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, hang on, hang on. Here we go. How's that? Is that a little better?
Much.
Okay. I don't know why. So I go between Teams and Zoom and Google, and it puts my volume down. First of all, it switches the microphone it's using, and then it puts the volume. Anyway, so thank you for saying that. Okay. So you'll see up here it says scmBLOX, S-I-M, our proprietary environment that we developed that allows us to create all these tools. It's an environment. It's like, think of Microsoft Excel. You use that to build spreadsheets. So spreadsheets is what you're doing, and so we're going to build supply chain models, and we do that with what we call scmBLOX, which has been developed here. But if I go and I'm going to open some kind of tool, oh, wrong one, sorry. I'm going to create a new. You'll see I've actually got within our environment. We have a lot of different things now. Users would only get exposed to the SCM part of it, but I've actually got we do project management, we do asset management, we do a whole bunch of other things, and there's all these other tools, but we're just going to do one for supply chain management. So this is how the interface starts, and I'm not seeing it, so I assume, can y'all see my cursor way over here on the left?
I can.
Okay, can you see it way over here on the right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't tell the expanse of it. So we have, these are agent models. They're represented by icons, but behind there is a very complicated model. And this, for example, I click and I drag that out onto the interface, and that's a make to order, MTO. So when I have it selected, you'll see over here on the right, I have a lot of different inputs and variables for that. So these can be quite complicated. I've got a make to stock, and if I pull that make to stock out here, it's got a different, some of the inputs are the same, but it's got a different set of inputs associated with it. I've got a warehouse, and if I pull that over, it's got yet another different set associated with it. The customer is another one, and the customer is a very simple, in this case, very simple. That's what gets expanded with whoever we're working with, and we create a specific, if they want a normal distribution or if they have a system that they have demand information from. But this is just a very simple, from our standpoint, we just give you something to start with. And it's basically just a time, like a little spreadsheet. It says, initially, I'm going to start, with 100, and at time 50, week 50 or day 50 or whatever, I'm going to go to 120. And it's very simple. But this can be very complicated. This is usually the first thing we work on to tailor for a client. But once you have something, it's just a click, draw, and connect, and I'm now connecting these things. And so now that's how I build my supply chain. I'll show you an example elsewhere. This gets to be a little too much. And what you're specifying, there's a bill of material that you would build or import. This again is stuff that we'd work with a client on. And this says that, for instance, I'm just making this up, a car is made up of an engine, an engine, and let's just say a tire. And the tire, if I click on this, I'm saying that there's 4 tires per engine. I could even add another one and say, well, for an engine, I need, I'm just going to make this up, pistons. And let's say we're worried about a 6-cylinder engine. And so I need 6 pistons for every engine. By default, it's 1. So I need 1 engine for a car. I need 4 tires. I need 6 pistons for an engine. You would then go back and let me just add something here so I can actually make this. You would then go, everybody that's in the model, every entity that you have, you would assign what material from that bill of material is associated with that. Hang on just a second.
Oh.
My Roomba decided to go right now, so it's making noise. So this one, I'm just going to build it right. This one's the piston. And if I go to this, and let's just label this one the piston company, I'm just real creative here. And this is the engine company. And if I now go here, I need to go assign the material, the engine to it. And if I pick, this is all the logic's done so that if I connect a piston to a piston, it won't work. Or if I connect the piston straight to the car, it won't work. I've defined how things need to come together, and now it's going to come together in that way. So you would see this could get very, very complicated. I could have, 2 suppliers for my piston. I need to now go say that this guy's a piston. So a lot of this stuff, we sort of, I'm doing it manually, but we'd work with the customer and like we could get a spreadsheet that pulls all this in and we automatically kind of create all this and present to them back the model with the bill of material and all that kind of stuff. So it all depends on working with the client. But if someone just took it right out of the box, this is how they kind of begin to build their model. And now what's interesting, so if I'm at the engine that's got 2 different piston suppliers. And one of the things that you can do is I'm now at the engine. I'm looking at order distributions. And so I've got 2 different companies that are providing pistons. And let's say I start initially with a 50-50 breakout of how I'm ordering 50% from one, 50% to the other. I can then move to some future time in the simulation, let's say 1 month later at day 30, and I can say I'm now going to move to a 70-30 arrangement. Whoops, that got rid of it. Let me pull it back up. And so now, if I were to move this ahead, once it got to day 30, it switched to the 70-30, and we can show the adjustment of orders. If I plan on shifting my order, so we can show that what happens in the supply chain is an old supplier is dropped off and I'm moving over to a new one or whatever, or I'm switching among the 2. One's a little more, we like this one better for whatever reasons, or I can even test that and say, well, how much should I be ordering from? I can run, the analysis that looks and says, well, how much should I be ordering? And at this point in time, should I switch and do all that kind of stuff? That's the analysis package that we can add on the back end. But what you start with is just all this. And so I can explore all these things. If I have, 10 different suppliers, I can sit there and say, here's how I'm going to order from the 10 different ones. And it builds all this up and it runs. I'm now going to go to results because again, I don't necessarily want to go through all the variables with everything because it just takes a while to do some of that. And a lot of times, again, this is based on what we did with the DoD. So some of this is not really relevant to commercial companies. And so what we do is spend the first bit with them and say, does this work for you? This is what this does out of the box. This is what this does. If not, if we want to incorporate certain policies that you have that aren't in the model, great. That's where we tailor the model. And then we come back. And now when we dump this MTO, or we might even we might leave all these and just add more icons to pick from that are more specific to them. There's no limit here to to what you do. That pallet can be as big as you want, as specific as you want. And, one of them could be a demand module. And so you're pulling that in, and that replaces the customer and is now representing the demand into the supply chain, whatever. But from here, you can, again, these I can put customers or demand profiles anywhere. And so I can look at, hey, if I got a competitor demanding from my same supplier and they double their orders, how does that impact me? And so all this kind of stuff can get put in there. So I just wanted y'all to see the interface, sort of see how things kind of come together. I've got a couple that are already built that we could look at, but I want to show you some of the webinars that we've done, because they actually build out a better story and give you what if scenarios and all that. So I want y'all to see, is that good so far? Okay. And then I want to admit to, I've talked to y'all, the free version that we give to universities is the beer game. And you'll notice the beer game, it just has a factory. So there's no bill of material in the beer game. We've stripped that out. So there's only one thing that can be produced. Beer, whatever you want to call it, it's just something. We call it the beer factory. So I'd have a beer, I'd have a warehouse. But notice when I select the factory, this is all the inputs that the factory has. So before I had a long list of like 50 things I could change, and I could scroll through them. It's a very simplified model that we give them for Beer Game on Steroids. That's why it's free. It's actually not our model. We got it from somebody else. If I click on the warehouse, you'll see it's even less because all the production elements are out. So I'm not trying to push Beer Game on y'all. I'm kind of telling you in the same environment, kind of same sort of tool. It looks and operates the same, but one's a very, very simplified version that we give to universities to use for free. And then go download that and be off and running. So let me stop sharing there. Where do I stop sharing? Oh, right there. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and now I'm going to show, which one is this? 109. Let me show y'all some, I think this is it. All right. So are y'all seeing a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. So now, so what I've done is I've used what we have in scmBLOX. I actually used a more simplified version where the model, if you look at the graphic at the bottom, basically is like this. So I'm not exposing them to the modeling. I'm just kind of saying, hey, any company in here receives material. They have a raw material inventory, and they try to keep 4 weeks of raw material. They have a production process. They have finished goods. They try to keep 4 weeks, and then they have deliveries. And so this is a basic model. Receive raw material, sits there till I produce, and then I'm trying to manage my inventories. We're going to run some simulations, very simple, 100 orders a week, steady state, and it's a 2-year simulation, so we're just going to see what happens in that 2 years. We pretend like this is only one product line with the company, one SKU. So if you see this go, tank, it doesn't mean the company shuts down. It just means that product line is having issues. There's some basic inventory control loops in there. That's part of what the modeling is, that says, hey, if I want to have 4 weeks of material. If I only have 3 weeks in my inventory, then I got to order more to kind of build that up. Or if I have too much, I order less so that I'm not over ordering. So that's in there. And right now it's set at what I call a moderate. It doesn't immediately try to fill that gap. It says, I'm going to fill part of that gap because I want to see what happens the next time step and if I really need that much. And so it's kind of a slower approach to it, but it's not super slow. So it's kind of this moderate. And again, 4 weeks of inventory. So if we look at let me make this a little bit bigger. Sorry. There you go. Hopefully that helps some.
Better.
Okay. So we're going to look at a very simple situation. I've got an OEM. They have a tier 1, and then they have 3 tier 2s, all supplying a different component. So I need all components to make my tier 1. So we did other models where I had redundant suppliers and they supplied the same thing and I could shift orders. But this one's a little more interesting because I need all 3 of these to make the one.
Yeah.
But you'll notice on there, if we're doing 100, I'm just kind of showing the numbers, the smooth flow. If we're doing 100, if the orders are 100 a week, then everyone's delivering 100 a week. If they have 4 weeks of finished goods, they've got 400 sitting in there. Their production is 100, so it's 100 kind of going through everybody, and then all my inventories are at 400. So I'm just kind of giving y'all that as the baseline to consider. So let's see. So this is just some of the information. Don't necessarily worry about that. But what we're going to look at here is I've got a company that is in the United States, and it is ordering from a tier 1 that's in China, and the tier 2s are also in China. So that's our baseline. We're all smooth, everything's fine. Well, scenario 1 is, hey, let's pretend like China as a whole gets shut down. We can't do trade with China for whatever the reason, the cluster where everybody is has bad weather, whatever you want to say, but there's this disruption for 2 months and everything's in China. What does that do to me? The second scenario is, hey, I'm gonna move a tier 1 over to the US, but all my tier 2s are still in China. So even though I moved my immediate supplier, did I really move my whole supply chain? No, the rest is over there. Then the third scenario is I'm going to pretend like I'm going to spread things out. So everything's not in China anymore. I've got 1 in Mexico, 1 in Africa, 1 in China. What does that do to me? And then the fourth one is I get a backup supplier for all of them. And we probably won't look into that one. So just to give you some information of what we're looking for, we start with a certain amount of money. We're going to make money over time, and the baseline is you make 120,000, whatever. Everything's flowing smooth, so I don't have any recovery times. I don't have spikes in my inventories. My longest lead time is 1 week. I'm satisfying all my orders, and my minimum profit margin at any point in time is 20%. So I'm just kind of, hunky-dory. And this is what the situation looks like. Here's me over here in the U.S. Here's my tier 1, and here are my various tier 2s, all sitting over there in China. But smooth flow, everything's good. I'm always delivering 100. No one's making any ripple, and my materials, my inventories are at 400. So then we introduce, and that was, never mind. That was us. There was a different baseline. Don't worry about that. But it's all smooth like that. So now we're going to say, hey, there's a 2-month embargo. All this, our tier 1 and all our tier 2s, shut down. What does that do to us? And so what used to be smooth, I can see now, hey, I start running out of raw material. And then whatever raw material, whatever I had inside my plant is what I'm living off of. So I go a little bit longer and I've got some finished goods, but I quit receiving stuff, and then I kind of run the rest of my stuff through, and eventually I run out of finished goods, which means eventually I stop delivering. So for a period of time, I dip. And then after these are weeks on the scale. So 8 weeks is the shutdown. But then things kind of start to come back and I start to build up. And of course, all this buildup is having me order more, and here comes the more, and then I start doing a little bit of bullwhippy kind of stuff of, whoops, I got too much, quit ordering, and I kind of settle back down. And for a while, we have to deliver more than 100 because we've got a backlog of orders that we're trying to make up, and so we deliver more for a while. But in the end, you'll see we're kind of back down to, hey, I've got 400. My raw material is still zigzagging. That's okay. But my finished goods are back to 400, and I'm delivering 100. So I've kind of recovered, but it sucked. I went through a very bad period here. And if we look at the impact, on this same table, don't worry about the second column of baseline. Well, actually, that is the baseline that we care about. So the 126 now. We didn't make near as much money. For a while, when we dipped, it took us 14 weeks to get back to even doing 50 out of the 100. It took us another 6 weeks, 20 weeks, to where we were finally delivering 100. Now, we actually delivered more than 100 because we wanted to make up. But to even get to that 100 took us that long. Our highest spike was 164% over what we had initially, 400, 164% higher. And the negative, that's red, you may not be able to see it, but a negative 96%. It means we almost flatlined for a while. We came pretty darn close to running out completely. If we look at finished goods, it never went over, it never overspiked, but it dropped to negative 98%. So we were razor thin that we almost were running out. Our highest orders backlog suddenly shot up to over 1,100%. So we had this huge, obviously, we've got weeks where we're not doing anything. And so all our orders, we can't deliver, our orders increase. The longest lead time ended up being 12 weeks. We could only deliver 61% on time. And we suffered a negative 558% profit margin at some point. So we really, really dipped. And that's a combination. I'll show you a chart here in a minute. And that's a combination of these oscillations in raw material. So you're paying for raw material, but you're not delivering much. So you've got a problem there, and it makes it look bad. But anyway, that's that example. So then we keep going and we say, well, we're going to move our tier one to the. Oh, go ahead, Diego. Go ahead.
How did you determine the ramp up time again? Like how was that lead time determined? Just by how long it takes to get things from China to the US?
A combination of that, and then just the process is internal to each of the companies. So the disruption was just basically off and then back on. So it's not like there was a ramp up from China. All of a sudden they were back on. So it was basically a step down and step right back up. All this you see is in response to, and as it travels through the supply chain of the tier twos coming back on, the tier one coming back on, and now it gets to me. And for a while I had to live off only what I had internally to the company, and then I started getting more, and now I could start delivering. So all those adjustments are really the adjustments of the system of that's the key, is we're treating the supply chain as a system. Every company is acting on their best behalf. And this is what it looks like when they all do that.
Got it.
Okay. So now we've moved the tier one over to the US, but there was still the same problem with the tier twos, the 2-month embargo over there. So we're going to take a look at what that does. And now you'll see, looks kind of like before. We run out for a while, but you'll notice we don't run out as bad because our tier one in the US did not stop either. Our tier one, so we had some extra inventory in our tier one that came to us that we didn't have the benefit of in the other one. So although these look kind of similar, they dip, it's not near as bad because that tier one is a bit of a buffer for me now. And so, but we see similar dynamics. It drops, our raw material drops, which then our finished goods drop, which causes our deliveries to drop. But you'll notice none of these are quite as low. And as I recover, my recovery is quicker, and the oscillations are not quite as bad. So we see some of that happening. And if we now compare those results, we're now way over here, this rightmost column, and we see our finances overall are a little bit better. The impact on our recovery is not as bad. It only takes us 3 weeks now to get back to 50% and 7 weeks to get to 100%. We only overshot by 75% on our raw material, whereas before it was 164. But we dropped down to negative 96 still. We still had this issue where we almost ran out, but not as bad on finished goods. We didn't go higher, but we only went negative 90% compared to negative 96. So we didn't dip as low. You'll see our highest orders backlog is only about 288%. So not near as bad because we were delivering a little bit more. Our longest lead time was only 4 weeks, and we actually got to where we were delivering 84% on time now compared to the 61, but still below. In our profit margin, the worst it got was negative 44%. So a little bit better. Whoops. Can y'all still see stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. goofed up and it showed me something. So now what we're going to do is look at a scenario where we've got suppliers spread out now. We've got them, but the one that we're still going to keep one in China, let's pretend, and it still has the 2-month embargo. So we got some issues there. So we look at the results. Again, kind of similar, because remember, I still have one in China, and I need from all my suppliers to make my component that's going to come to me. So it's not that I still need this China one, but you'll notice it's kind of not as bad, but it's very similar to the one we just saw because we still have this one in China. And in the chart, there's a little bit of an improvement. Finances get a little bit better. 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks on the recovery to 50%, 4 weeks, the oscillations are kind of the same. We only get up to 150% on the order spike. 2.5 weeks, we're up a little bit more on time delivery. So, a little bit better, not as bad because we actually, since I didn't lose everything, my constraint was just China, whereas before my constraint was everybody because everybody was impacted. Now I've got plenty of inventory for all the other ones, and I'll order, and I'm great. And all I'm doing is really just waiting for this one from China to deliver. Then the last thing, then what we do is say, well, now let's double up and give you some relief in all these areas. And we had done a previous one where we showed the doubling up helps, and so we didn't show the results. But what I want you to see, this is the comparison of the raw material inventories for all those scenarios. So here's our baseline, nice and smooth. Here's that first one where we tanked because everything in China shut down. For 2 months, we tanked. It's this red dashed line, and eventually I crawl out of it. This is the next two are really, really close because, again, they still have a tier 2 in China, and so I'm seeing that. But one's slightly better than the other, simply because I've got suppliers in these other countries and I have plenty of those, but those roughly track the same. If we look at finished goods, you'll see the red dashed there's my big dip. Everything in China shut down, big dip. I suffer a lot down here. I finally crawl out. These other two are a little bit closer and a little bit better. And when we look at deliveries, you'll see here's the red. Again, scenario one, when everything was in China, it shut down. I suffered in my deliveries. Then I had to over deliver. And you'll see similar dynamics with these other two, just not as bad. And if we go to the finances, there's a chart on the profit margin, and it's kind of, all over the place. So I'm going to kind of skip that one. But in the end, this is sort of the numbers, the financial numbers. That red one had us tanking. So we started 100,000, we gained money, but we didn't with the China one. We actually lost money because we were paying for things and not being able to deliver. And then the other scenarios are kind of a little bit better and a little bit better. So I want y'all, that's scmBLOX in action, one version. We then built on, that was this one. Give me just a second. Let me close that one. Let me pick the next one. I want to kind of do them in order here. 113. Okay. So now let me show you this one. So y'all are seeing the screen again?
Yes.
Okay. So what we did in this series of webinars is we kept using the same, we just kept building on. So everything you learned from the previous one still applies. The baseline is always the same. It looks like what I'm showing you here. We kind of explain, hey, it's the same thing, 4 weeks, blah, blah, blah. All the chart, the baseline chart looks the same for everybody, for all these, because that's our starting point. But in this one, what are we doing in this one? Oh, okay, here's what we're doing. Okay, so same setup as before, the way we ended. So I got a tier 1 in the US, I got a tier 2 in Mexico, a tier 2 in Africa, and a tier 2 in China. So the same structure we left with before is where we are. So we look like this. And we don't have double up because we're going to test a few things. So we're not doubled up the ideal way we want. We've only got one. And what you see in the white numbers are the shipping times or transportation times. And so it's just geographically proportionate. It takes 4 weeks from Mexico, 8 weeks from Africa, and 12 weeks from China. So just kind of show you, and it's only 1 week within the U.S. from my supplier to me. So the scenarios are going to be, we're basically looking. There's a reason for why we were doing this. We were looking at which companies might go bankrupt and all this kind of stuff. But what we're basically doing is saying, what if each one of those shut down? Which one has the worst impact on me? Is it my tier 1? Is it my tier 2 in Mexico, tier 2 in Africa, tier 2 in China? So that's what the scenarios are, is I'm going to shut one of them down, just like we did in China, but now I'm going to pretend like that happens in all these other places. And I want to now see which one kills me the worst. Here's our baseline, same baseline results. You're going to see some of the similar things. So the first thing is we're going to kill our tier 1 and say the tier 1, for whatever reason, had financial struggles and quit shipping to us for 2 months. Again, just exact same thing we did for the China. We're just saying it's the tier 1. And here's now what my chart looks like. Of course, like we saw in the other one, I suffer. My tier 1 can't deliver, so I don't get any, I've stopped receiving from my tier 1, which means I start plummeting, run out of raw materials, but I'm living off what I had, so my finished goods make it a few weeks longer, but then my deliveries are impacted, and then I start kind of trying to crawl out, and in the end, I'm fine with, you see, I'm starting to settle down, raw materials almost back down, I've got finished goods, I'm delivering, everything's fine, but I suffered in between, and this is how I reacted and recovered from that suffering. And so if we, look at that chart, we got hit financially. Our recovery, it's 13 weeks to 50%, 15 weeks, same kinds of, these are the same metrics. We just keep giving different examples. You see a 165% spike in raw material, but notice you see a negative 100. We run out. There's a period of time where we have nothing. Same with finished goods. We run out. We have nothing. So if you look, and then our orders backlog spikes, our longest lead time, 14 weeks, we only deliver 71% on time. But you'll look, our profit margin is negative infinity because at one point we aren't selling anything and we have all these costs. So we make zero money, but yet we're paying for all this stuff. So bad situation. Next one, shut down Mexico. Everybody else is going, tier 1's fine. Everybody else, what happens when Mexico shuts down? So we get a similar chart, but not near as bad as if it's our tier 1. We do eventually, because all 3 of these things are needed to make my tier 1. Eventually, that's going to cause some trouble. So it does, and we see a dip. I made it longer. I lasted a little bit longer before I suffered because there was all that material product in my tier 1 that could still come to me. So that delayed this from impacting me because there was more in the supply chain before I got hit by this. And then finally my tier 1 doesn't have anything, so therefore I don't have anything. So I suffer, but you see similar dynamics. I go down, I dip in raw material, which makes me dip in finished goods, which then makes me dip in deliveries, and then I kind of start climbing back out. And if we look at the results from those, you'll see financially we do better. We've cut, the time for any of these recoveries are slower. We're not spiking as much on anything. Our longest lead time is now 4.5 weeks. We get up to 87% on-time deliveries, and we only go down to negative 375 on the profit margin. Now this is what you use scmBLOX for. Shut this one down, shut this one down, shut this one down, shut this one down. Which one's the worst? So now we're doing the Africa one. And very similar chart to what we saw with the Mexico one. But you can't quite tell. When I compare them all at the end, you'll see that there's a slight, there are some slight differences. But same thing, I dip, I run out of raw material, or I'm low on raw material, low on finished goods, low on deliveries, but I kind of climb back out. And if we look, we'll notice it's actually not as bad if it happens in Africa, if it happens in Mexico. Well, both of these are better than if it happens at the tier 1, obviously. But you'll see if it happens at the African supplier, I do a little better financially. My recovery time drops to 2 weeks and 3 weeks. I've got some, some spikes in inventory, but I'm not down as low. I was negative 99, so I was almost out. Now I got a little wiggle room. The finished goods only dipped to negative 83 instead of negative 97. So, again, I got some room there. I only had a 68%, spike in orders. My longest lead time, 2 weeks, not too bad, 93% on time, and a negative 11% prop. So we're doing better. This is not as, obviously we wouldn't want this to happen. But if I'm going to look at all of them happening, which one's the worst? Well, this is so far is not the worst. This is the least bad. And so now the last thing we're going to do is look at China, which we had seen before. And so we kind of know those results already of what happened there. But what's interesting is you'll notice raw materials not as bad. Finished goods doesn't get near as bad, and our deliveries actually never suffer. If it's that because we set up these delivery times and all that. And what's interesting, if I now come and if we look at the chart, you'll see there's actually, because we could deliver 100%, we never suffered on lead time. We never suffered on having to recover. We had some spikes, but not too bad. So now let's compare the raw materials. This is me, the OEM, my raw material inventory based on what's happened each of these shutdowns. Here's my tier 1 shutting down. So obviously the closer it is, the worse it is. I care most about my immediate suppliers. If they shut down, they have a immediate impact on me, and it's bad. So we show that right here. You'll see these other 3 are kind of staggered, and they're Mexico on the left, Africa in the middle, and China on the right. And what's actually interesting in this case is part of the reason that China, the impact of China is not as bad as the others, is because of the transportation pipeline. There's extra inventory being held in that pipeline because it's another 4 weeks. So it bought me 4 more weeks. So geographically, the further you are away and it takes longer to transport, that's actually more buffer in the system that protects me. And so that's what we see right here. The 4-week difference in those dynamics is all based on having some in the pipeline. So anyway, and then you can kind of see the impact of the rest of it. But if we look at same thing on deliveries, when it's my tier 1, that delivery drops and I suck for a while. Now it's my Mexico, Africa, and Chinese, and you'll see they get less and less. They buy me more time, and because of that, their impact is actually less. So my dip in finished goods is less and less and less for each of these 3. You can kind of see, here's how bad it is with Mexico, here's how bad it is with Africa, and here's how bad it is with China. But if we go to now the deliveries, and again, this is me, this is the impact on me. Deliveries with the tier 1 going out, very bad. Not as bad with Mexico, not as bad with Africa, and it's a flat line with China. It's just enough to keep me from being impacted on my deliveries to my customers. So another, example, and we can also show the financial impact of that. But that's another set of how you can use scmBLOX and us actually using it to address some hypothetical but realistic scenarios. And let me see if the last one is worth showing. In the
financials, you only have revenue and profit. But what about like you said, right? Okay, perfect. My China suppliers, they take, they're better for a risk perspective because since I have 12 days of inventory in the transportation, then, I have a bigger buffer. But then that's also 3 times more inventory dollars than what you have.
But that's captured. That's captured. That's why that's already in my overall funds and my profit margin. Those are reflected in there. The timing, the profit margin is more impacted by the timing. When I'm not selling anything, but I'm receiving a lot of materials and I'm paying for those, that looks bad. And you'll see in that profit margin goes up and down based on me holding raw materials. So all that's accounted for. So even with that, that's what you're seeing the results. So financially we're trying to capture. Now, if someone wants a more complicated financial model, then we would tailor and we would add that in there. This is just a very basic model, of finances. And so, anyway, so am I sharing a new screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So this one was real interesting. So what we've got in this one, again, it's all the same kind of setup. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Sorry. Make it, I've got 3 of these open. So, so what's happening here, this is the basic layout. So I've got now, that's me, the light blue OEM. But what we're doing is looking at this big example where I have 3 industries, defense, EVs, electronics, all feeding down to the same tier 3 critical rare earth material. I call it unobtainium, but you can imagine what it could be. It could be something, but they all come down in that raw material at the bottom. Here's another thing scmBLOX can do. It can represent a company, or it can just represent a cluster of companies that are a capability. So that raw material is really a cluster of companies off somewhere, in Asia that we're depending on. It's not necessarily one. But I've kind of represented this as I got 3 supply chains kind of coming. And so what we're going to look at is our kind of regular baseline. It's still always 100. It's always the same baseline. But we're going to say that the electronics industry triples their orders for whatever reason. They decide they've got some new products or they want to get a hold of the critical material. So they're going to triple their orders. And now we're going to see the ripple effect I'm showing here, 3 times the orders, and we're going to see how it travels through the supply chain, and I get impacted over here, even though I change nothing at all. And we're going to see that travel through, that ripple effect travel through, because of course, the tier 3, the raw material suppliers don't have infinite capacity. So when orders increase, they have to build capacity. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes them a while to build capacity, and then they have the capacity, and now everyone's getting their orders. But if we look, then when that happens, now notice, I'm the OEM. It's still me. Everything we've been seeing before, I changed nothing. But because of that 3 times order from that industry that happened, by the way back here in month 1, it took all this time, and a year later, I get impacted. And suddenly I'm not getting raw material, which means I don't get finished goods, which means I can't deliver. And then we see this common kind of dynamic of pulling out and recovering from that. And so we didn't worry so much about the finances on this because we were pretending like we were defense and every life, we're saving lives and all that kind of stuff. But the next scenario was, well, let's pretend like we developed a new product. It took us 10 months to develop that new product. And when we did that, we could cut 50% of this critical material, and we're using 50% wood. It doesn't matter, but something that's common and I don't have a problem. So is that worth the investment for me to make to develop a new product that doesn't rely on this material as much? 50%. So in month 11, because it's going to take me 10 months to develop this. So in month 11, so at month 1, 3 times the order, we say, oh, let's develop something new. It takes me 10 months. So month 11, I'm now making a 50-50 shift. And if we look, that actually helped us. We did suffer in raw material, but we didn't dip so much, finished goods didn't dip so much, and we were able to keep delivering to our customer. So it was very interesting to see that that's a worthwhile endeavor. We looked at another situation where, what if you took a little bit longer and you could get 80% removed? And so you're only 20% with this other material, the critical material, and 80% is wood or water or something that's common that we're not going to worry about. But it takes you a little bit longer. It takes you a couple months longer. Is that worth it? And we were able to show it's actually not worth it because that extra couple of months is not soon enough to beat this bow wave that's about to come at you. And so we still suffer. Now, not as bad as before, but we suffer. So anyway, it's a very interesting, we're able to show, hey, one strategy for critical materials is quit using them. redo your product. Well, and now we're showing, hey, if you could get this much gain over this amount of time, it's actually worth it. Waiting longer to do more may not be worth it. Maybe in the end you want to be 100%, so that could be worth it. But I'm just saying these things in between, really, now you've got a strategic way of looking at the supply chain and understanding how these have impacts. And now I can test different strategies for my company and see how they hold up. So there you go. I just wanted y'all to see some examples of us actually using scmBLOX and the kinds of questions it can answer.
Perfect. Clear on my end. I mean, the takeaway for me, since we have 2 minutes, is good to know that, this tool does this. I do think you have competition, especially RiverLogic, for big.
They don't do this. They are very, very limited. They will say they do this, but they can't. I go ask them to do a tier 3 for 2 years and to show the impact, and they'll scramble to do that. Because I know they're using either discrete event or linear programming. I forget which one. And those are, as a technology, those are not built to do this kind of stuff. What I'm doing here is not built to do. This isn't designed to tell you tomorrow whether you're going to have inventory. The tools like RiverLogic and Optologic and Simwell and name some others, 4Kites or what, I can't remember all of them. They're good at telling you in the next days, weeks, and perhaps some months, here's what might happen. But they can't show all these adjustments that everyone's making over time and that big picture impact on you 2 years later.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's, and the question again, so do you have the consulting bandwidth to implement this for a client if a client comes in tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. And the effort, I don't know if I told you, we'd say, here are the models that are in there. Do you like them? Do you not like them? And if you don't like them, then give us a week or two to create new ones for you and then get you up and going. And within a month, you'll be running simulations using your own models, it's tailored exactly the way you want it to be. It's got all the extra stuff you want in it. It's got a demand module that does whatever you want. And you're off and running. Within a month, you're off and running. Okay. 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's a good tool. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Okay. Well, good. I just wanted y'all to, purpose of this was just to show y'all it in action. So now you know what slides, what results look like, the kinds of questions, the big picture questions we're asking and how it answers them. And that was really, we can keep talking, how we get it out in the market, how we do this kind of stuff. That's what I need help with. So,
Yep.
Yeah. I wanted to see what a customer would see.
Did this answer that? Let me start there.
I think so. Yes. Because, I needed to put myself in the customer's shoes with my own visualization of what they would see. The benefit, like I've said from the beginning, is every customer has a bill of material.
Yeah.
But not every customer has their data.
Thank you, Chris. That was really helpful. Very cool tool, and happy to help you grow. My game's a long game, unfortunately, but happy.
We'll talk after. If you got to drop, go ahead and drop. We'll talk after.